Hummer. When you hear that name, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Do you think of a large gas-consuming beast? Do you think of a symbol of compensation and egotism? No matter what comes to mind, I'm sure that it's probably negative. But is this brand really deserving of such bad stereotypes? Does it deserve having a reputation shrouded in negativity? I, for one, believe not. The Hummer's reputation as a bulky gas guzzler is one of the most common portrayals of said vehicle. However, such negative stigmas completely overlook its role as a cultural icon, one that embodies boldness, resilience, and a spirit that can only be described as uniquely American. So, without further ado, this is the history of the Hummer. The Hummer's origins as a military vehicle make it a symbol of American strength and ingenuity. If you weren't already aware, Hummers trace their origins back to the 80s, a very important time period where the world saw cultural, economic, and populational growth, but a particularly important time for the US, as they were in the midst of a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Long gone were the days of the Jeep, as the United States military was in need of a new, durable, and reliable troop transport vehicle. The US sent out specification details to 61 different companies and wanted some of that sweet US money, 5 of which actually ended up making a prototype before the deadline, one of which was the company AM General. After rigorous testing in a facility in Nevada, it was concluded that AM General's design was the one the US would promote, and from then on, every major conflict from the 80s to now had AM General's Humvee at the forefront of direct combat. The Humvee was designed to be highly adaptable, being able to trek through rivers, rocky terrain, and more. Its axle was built so that it was wide enough for the tires to drive through the tracks that tanks left behind. And as if that wasn't enough, Humvees are frequently seen with heavy machine guns mounted on top, providing soldiers with 360 degrees of defense. Of course, with how much attention the Humvee got from its direct military engagements, it's no wonder why the streets of Hollywood were filled with them leading up to the turn of the century. The Hummer's adaptation to civilian life made it a cultural phenomenon that represented American ambition and confidence. The ironic thing about the Hummer's introduction to civilian life was that it was pioneered by someone who was also featured quite prominently in Hollywood films. That person was Arnold Schwarzenegger. His fascination with AM General's Humvee led him to commission AM General to ship out a modified version of the Humvee. With his lobbying, he was able to convince AM General to create an entire line of civilian-made Humvees that people could buy. Arnold's Humvee became a national phenomenon. No true American thought the Hummer wasn't a cool-looking car, and in 1999, just 7 years after civilian Humvees hit the market, General Motors bought the marketing and distribution rights for the Humvee, finally transitioning it from Humvee to the brand Hummer. Hummer continued selling AM General's Humvee design under the name Hummer H1, but leading up to the turn of the century, they knew they needed something new, something less rugged and more adaptable to a casual lifestyle, which is why, in 2003, Hummer released the Hummer H2, which is most definitely the version of the Hummer that you, the viewer, and plenty of other people know the Hummer as. It was slimmer, featuring less sharp angles than its older brother had. It had a nicer interior, fit with properly cushioned seats that could comfortably seat up to 6 people. The Hummer H2 was the one that launched Hummer into fame. It was the perfect fit for those who wanted something luxurious and rugged. It was almost as if everywhere you went you couldn't escape the Hummer H2. Even in video games like GTA 4 and 5, games that take place in a fictional New York and Los Angeles respectively, and were made in the late 2000s to early 20s, featured the Hummer H2 in all of its glory. But, as with all great things, it has to come to an end, and the Hummer was no exception. For a combination of reasons, that being the poor sales figure of the Hummer H3, a version of the Hummer that aimed to be way more casual than the Hummer H2 was, the global recession which hurt the economy, poor business decisions, and the negative perception of the vehicle which grew to a peak near the end of the 2000s, General Motors forced Hummer to hang up the towel and retire for good in 2010. That was until 2020, when GMC revealed something that had the potential to take the Hummer brand in a new direction and revive it as a whole. That something was the Hummer EV. The Hummer's future as an electric car is one that pushes the legacy of the Hummer in a safer and less bombastic direction that almost does a disservice to the Hummer's past. GMC wanted to revive the Hummer brand, but they knew they couldn't just rehash the old Hummers and call it a day. They knew they needed to adapt to the modern age, and what better way to do that than by making their newest model completely electric? And so it was a plan, as in 2022, the first of the Hummer EVs hit the market and would be pretty well received. The Hummer EV was what the Cybertruck wished it was. Buyers loved the sleek, white, and almost futuristic design it featured, and its nice interior. It was so cool that it was even featured in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, a game that was released the same year that the Hummer EV came out. But while the Hummer EV was certainly a welcome addition to the Hummer family, it bore almost no resemblance to its predecessors aside from its name. When compared to the H1, 2, and 3, it looks nothing like them. This, of course, was done deliberately. It's safe to say that the Hummer EV wasn't just meant to push the Hummer brand in a new direction, it was meant to sweep their negative history under the rug. Think about it, an all-electric Hummer would please the environmentalists who complain about the Hummer's low gas mileage and carbon emissions. It would put the Hummer brand in a more marketable position. This intentional erasure of their history does a disservice to the triumphant beasts that once roamed the deserts of the Middle East and the streets of America. So, what does the future of Hummer hold? Well, as of recently, Hummer EVs haven't been selling all too well, leaving GMC in a bit of a tricky position. Do they pull the plug on the Hummer brand and stop selling Hummer EVs? Or do they spend more time and money making the perfect Hummer? I think most people would agree that the Hummer was in fact a product of its time, and maybe, instead of trying to revive the brand, it's best to let the beast rest, and remember it as a relic of a bygone era.